Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
If you're a fan of comic books and comic book conventions, Daytona Beach Comic Con needs to be on your list of must-attend events. It's a show that actually focuses on comic books. Imagine that! This year's event is happening on Saturday, September the 6th, and Sunday, September the 7th. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. There's a new convention in town, and it's sure to be mega fun without the mega expense. Comics, toys, collectibles, pop culture. ShadowCon, Saturday, February 1st, 2025 in Orlando, Florida. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. If you find yourself in the Orlando area, and let's be honest, doesn't everyone come to Orlando for the House of Mouse? Head over to Coliseum of Comics to get your comic book fix. Be sure to check out their location on East Colonial Drive, where they carry a wide selection of independent comics, including Silverline books. Stop by and don't forget to tell them Silverline sent you. Hey, if you're an independent comic creator looking to get your comic printed, look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our comics and do a fantastic job. They can even print special edition covers. When you reach out to them, be sure to tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, and I'm joined, as always, by David Rios.
Hello.
Jose Fuentes.
Everybody.
And Ron Fourier.
Howdy.
And tonight, we'll be talking about hand-to-hand combat in comics. This is a subject we hit on, I feel like, fairly frequently across the different shows. I know we hit on last year. But it's with how prevalent action is in comics, especially because, it is often a action-forward medium, or at least it's a visual-driven medium, so having good action is necessary when you are telling an action story. And we'll be focusing on hand-to-hand combat since Kung Fu is cool, but also because very often, you'll have superheroes that only need to use their fists, or you'll have skilled martial artists, anything like that. And as a personal preference, I feel like you can just get more crunchy, more impactful with hand-to-hand combat. You can have a good gunfight orchestrating it, but usually you have like a one-off ending, or the detail is what it is. But you have to spend more time characterizing it like a dance, like in John Wick, right? Because you can't just have people unloading clips into each other, because that they both die unless they're superpowered, right? But with hand-to-hand combat, you can spend a lot of time doing what I like to call the two old brothers meme. Also, the end of Metal Gear Solid 4, where you have two old veterans just slugging each other in the face for panels on panels to drive home the point of where the relationship has gone. Okay, well, I'll open up the floor here because I don't believe we have any housekeeping tonight. So I'll open up 4 straight ahead and go into Ron, Jose, or David. What are some of your initial thoughts, preferences, likes, dislikes about hand-to-hand comic in comics?
Excuse me. I like hand-to-hand combat. Like, I mean, I've told before, I'm a big Western fan. Obviously, I'm a big fan of dive and shoot, like just very much the dynamic, the choreography of that. But man, having some hand-to-hand combat, it's pretty like invigorating. Like you can show a lot of motion and a lot of like combos, a lot of like movement across, you know what I mean, the page, just doing hand-to-hand combat. And if you're as accurate as you can be with particular, like you mentioned martial arts, if you're accurate as you can be with the poses, the stances and whatnot, you know what I mean, then that just is just that much more, you know what I mean, appealing to people, because those that know, you know what I mean, those that are in the know in regards to like martial arts training and whatnot, they're gonna be like, oh dude, like I know that move, like I know what comes next after that. I mean, it's just, it definitely is like more what's the word, like engrossing, more
Engaging.
like pulls the reader. Yeah, engaging, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let me digress a little bit, and then we'll get back to this whole idea of fisticuff on a comic book page, because I think you're going to see the similarities of what I'm about to relate, and that's the fact that in Hollywood, okay, in that storytelling medium, way back in the early days of cinema, I mean, the silent films all the way up to the 1930s, if you had any kind of an altercation of a fist fight, a fight between two actors on the screen, all right, there was no real structure to the fight. Directors would basically get stuntmen in there and say, go to it. Mm-hmm. And if you ever see some early silent films, Westerns or any other genre, and you see guys fighting, it's a mess. It's just sloppy all over the screen. And this continued all the way up until the mid-1930s, until one day, and a gentleman I actually mentioned here last week on our show talking about chases, all right, car chases and chase scenes in comics. And what happened was a really well-known director in the Cliffhanger serials that they used to produce in the mid-30s, late 1930s, whatever, where you'd have this 15-minute segment, and at the end the hero would get thrown off a cliff or whatever, and you'd have to come back next week to see how he survived or not, right? The chapter serials. And they were still doing pretty much the same thing as the silent films, which is basically a director would yell, action, the hero would be fighting, and it looked like a mess. So one night, one of the finest serial directors, a gentleman named William Whitney, and his ace stuntman from Republic Pictures, the gentleman I mentioned last week, Yakima Canute, literally went to the movies one night and saw a Ziegfeld Follies movie, like Broadway Melodies of 1932 or whatever, right? And as they were watching them, they were watching these elaborate dance routines with like 100 dancers, 50 men, 50 women, elaborate sets, and the camera following them, and everything was in lockstep. Of course, it was choreographed, all right? The point is, watching this movie, afterwards, they stop at the bar to have a beer, and they're sitting there talking, and both of them realize, why can't we do that with a fight scene? Why can't we choreograph a fight scene? So sure enough, the next day, they're on the set of some, like Spy Smasher serial or whatever, and the scene calls for a 5-minute fight, and Canute gets his other stuntmen together, and they literally plan out what the fight's going to be. Who's going to punch who? where they're going to fall, what piece of furniture is going to get broken. Then they start shooting the scene in segments, and together developed and became some of the best stuntmen in Hollywood, but changed the face of Hollywood fight scenes from that point on. As we all know, there are today more than ever, we have all kinds of action movies everywhere, from Hong Kong across the world. And trust me, if you're a martial artist and you know how to choreograph a fight, go to Hollywood, because you've got a career waiting for you right there. Now let's just juxtapose that to the comic book page. All right, very easily. All right.
Yeah.
If you're writing a comic book that has any kind of a fight scene, because you've got your hero who doesn't have superpowers, if it's Batman or whatever, basically you have to plan out in your mind that fight scene, how it's going to play out, what's going to happen on this panel, how is it going to lead to that panel, who's going to throw the punch, is it going to get blocked, what's the reaction to the punch, does the guy fall on just the floor, or is there something they fall into? All those things come into play. Now, when I first started my own writing career, it was serendipitous for me that I had started writing a series called Street Fighter, having nothing to do with the video game, but it was about a high school teacher who basically got fed up of watching drugs come into his community and a lot of his students getting hooked. And so, trying to stop this, he decides to become this vigilante who goes out at night and takes on the drug pushers. But before he even does this, he takes a class in martial arts. Well, the point being here, and this is to me adamant, to this whole, how you do this, I was actually studying Shorin-ryu karate, all right, which is an Okinawan-based karate. And point of fact, what you like to do as a writer, I actually use my own sensei as the character in the comic teaching my hero. But learning karate as I did and writing that, it was easy enough for me to lay out fight scenes, blocks, punches, kicks, etc., and make them authentic. Then, knock on wood, I had Gary Carter as my my artist on Street Fighter. And Tim, I sent you a page earlier today. If you have that, you might want to put it up, because Gary did such a great job of interpreting the fight scene. And this appears in issue number 1 of what was a 5-issue miniseries.
Yeah, it was. Let's see. Make sure I have them in the right order.
It's the black and white one.
Perfect. Okay. Yep. So here we go. Boom.
I mean, here you go from a high kick. He's fighting multiple people at the same time. And that's a back kick you see in the upper left panel. And then this big guy grabs him from behind. So guy coming at him in the front, classic, look out, kick to the family jewels.
Mm-hmm.
And then a spinning kick, while at the same time, he connects with the guy who was holding it. Yeah. And this particular sequence went at least 2 or 3 pages, but Gary just followed my script beautifully. And as I mentioned last week, there's that Steve Ditko effect. There were artists that when I was growing up were classic for doing great fight scenes. Steve Ditko being one of them, and his influence you can see on this page clearly from panel to panel. Gil Kane was awesome in doing the same thing. I'm sure as we're talking here, I can name a few others digging into the past. But again, I can't stress enough that if you're a writer and you're going to be writing fight scenes, hey, do some homework. I mean, hey, go watch a kung fu film if you have to, whatever. But think out the moves, all right? Be authentic with what your characters are doing. The whole point of a good fight scene is, again, they're not Supermen, all right? So they run the risk, and it adds suspense to the scene that they can be injured quite easily unless they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And I'll probably talk more because I have not had a chance to write a comic that heavily features traditional hand-to-hand combat or just weaponless fighting, even though I have a lot of experience in boxing, and eventually one of my goals is to write a comic that incorporates realistic KO1 kickboxing.
I thought one of your goals was to body slam someone through a table at a convention.
True. I also will serve as a subject matter expert on suplexes.
Right.
But because I've also taken some professional wrestling courses, so I know how to slam someone without actually hurting them. Something also you do really well here that you already had thought about, but something that is a clear tell when someone is writing in a fight scene but doesn't know how fights work is when you have one hero fighting multiple attackers and they take their turns attacking the person, right? You have them coming in and out. It happens a lot in movies. It also happens in comics, and it's a clear sign of the writer is writing the hero but is not writing the action. I mean, and right away you can see your hero being double teamed, one guy going for a grapple, another guy going for a knife. And then even down here, even though he's fighting them off, it's a scene that will happen because everyone charged at the same time. And so you have to think about how you're writing your character to be able to fight multiple assailants, whether that's, attacking multiple directions or ideally getting them all on one side of them.
Right. It's the term you used earlier, Tim was perfect. It's a dance.
Yeah.
And you have to know where everybody is and how they're going to move. And part of the karate that I learned, ultimately after, doing it for about a year, we would spar all the time, but eventually part of the sparring also was taking on at least two opponents at the same time.
Yeah.
And being aware of, immediately, if you're fighting multiple opponents, they're going to try to outflank you. And all kinds of different things come into effect in is how you defend yourself, how you counter, measuring who's the closest, who's the primary threat, the secondary threat. And all those things should be figured into a script. I mean, we writers use our imagination, but hey, it doesn't take all but 2 seconds to grab a legal pad and a pencil and even do stick figures if you need to show where the bodies are in the fight. All right. I mean, I think one of the finest comics as far as dealing with fisticuffs is Mike Barron's The Badger. And I know for a fact that Mike, still to this day, actually writes his scripts with stick figures. Yeah. And he uses stick figures in the panels for his artists to develop. So, I mean, Mike's also a martial artist himself and studies mixed martial arts. So, again, you cannot be authentic enough. Yeah. And that's the best way to say it. And like Jose said as well, the cleaner you make that action sequence appear and realistic, the much more entertaining it is for your reader, all right? I mean, you could literally maybe spur some young kid reading this going, man, I got to learn how to do this stuff.
Right. I mean, that's like how many kids took up Kung Fu or karate because they read Iron Fist?
Yeah, probably lots of them.
Yeah. I thought Iron Fist is also an interesting example. Like you can tracking that one historically. I don't have any examples pulled up, but going from, old school classic Iron Fist where there's more on the superpower than on the actual fighting, right? Where you'd have one green flame punch or one bicycle kick to end the scene, and that's it. But later on, when they passed it over to the Hun Con office, and when they did their Asian Avengers group, or what it's called. But he had Swordmaster, who then became Iron Fist. And he had someone who was actually I believe the first writer actually practiced martial arts and the second writer was just a fan of it. But now all of a sudden you got correct rest poses in between each sequence or correct chain of combinations coming from this character. And it was, like you're saying, it's that moment of, even if you're just not a practitioner, just taking time to study it or to watch a movie or to watch a visual example and then incorporate that into your writing, it can do a lot to not only add to the believability and the, I'm going to use my college hat here, verisimilitude of the fight scene, but also can add flavor and depth to your character, because now you can see their full range of motion and how it expresses itself under stress or in conflict.
No, right. I think every generation. I mean, up until maybe the 1960s, most fistfights that we saw again were choreographed in Hollywood. Were basically from Western type of, like you said, boxing, and we rarely saw anything else other than that kind of action sequence in comics until the arrival of the Green Hornet in the early 1960s and Bruce Lee as Kato. I mean, literally, I know for a fact. I mean, I was a kid watching that, and the minute that series came on television, and Lee did his kung fu, within months of that show being on air, there were American kids across the country signing up for martial arts classes. All right.
Right.
The Oriental, whether it was judo or again karate or kung fu, whatever. All right. I mean, it lit a torch under young people because at the same time it looked beautiful. It was poetic. I mean, the way Lee moved was amazing. And then, of course, that led to what was it? What was the other one? Was Kung Fu itself with David Carradine.
David Carradine.
Yeah. It all became the craze, and everybody and his uncle wanted to learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah. And it's not to say that you can't have visually compelling traditional boxing either, but kind of your point is, I don't know if they felt like they needed to play down the fighting, or if it because we saw that period when movies are coming out where people were trying to still act like they would in stage plays or choreograph like they would in stage plays. That's how you got a lot of like overacting to camera and things like that. But also a lot of those slower action sequences and a lot of boxing was very old-timey fighting jack, two arms up kind of deal, right?
Right.
Whereas going to something like, I mean, it's a Korean movie, but they use American boxing and Korean kickboxing, but The Raid, and even comparing like Robert Pattinson's Batman compared to Christian Bale's, you can see what good choreographed boxing can look like when you're actually focusing on the impact of each thing. Because again, it's a fighting technique which is designed to win as quickly as possible by either winding or breaking your opponents down. And so you need to spend a lot of time selling those impacts to like feel the like give your audience whiplash almost as they're feeling like arms slapping against guards and stuff like that. Not necessarily these slow one-off punches that you hear a cartoon smacked across the face and the guy goes down.
Another thing to keep in mind when writing one of these scenes, and again, there's this connection with how to film these things. All right, and that's I think one of the dumbest things that an action director does is have way too many close-ups during a fight scene.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, literally get the heck back and show the fight, show all of it. All right. This is why I love this page and I wanted to use it tonight, because Gary literally shows you almost his entire body from panel to panel.
Yeah.
So you see all the motion happening. All right. I mean, to me, the worst thing you can do in writing an action fight sequence is having, an uptight close shot. Okay, I get, maybe the single, one panel punch, the fist hitting some nose and breaking some guy's nose. All well and good. It worked. Yeah. All right. But don't do all, mid shots or close ups. All right. For heaven's sakes, get back and show the action.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And spend a lot of time focused on where also something which is interesting here, and if I use the right mouse button, I think something that a great comic artist is also going to keep in mind is the visual flow of the page itself, or how the panels float in there. And they'll create kind of this natural arc with the action that also draws your eye, across where they want it to.
Right.
And it's the same idea of controlling your camera angles. And as a writer, you can, give your you're going to be visualizing this in your head, and you can give your artist so much instruction, and this is where communication comes in. But understanding what's important in your fight scene is the same thing as with prose or with character development, right? Or with character moments or plotting is unnecessary versus necessary details, red herrings. Chekhov's gun, the whole thing of, is this a person who is mostly fighting with their legs? Okay, well then spend a lot of time developing these panels that focus on their hip to foot section. Yep. And as a writer, that's also where we're probably going to be thinking of how am I, tracing this dance. And my brain went off somewhere else. But I mostly write with with Soul Syndic coming up in the future. It's something that I'm writing mostly with swords and spears and sort of traditional Roman fighting utensils. And so it's a lot of the action in my mind comes through like the vision of the shoulder and like how that is angling itself and how we're going to move the bodies around that way.
Right. It really helps to have a visual artist who also, he or she has had some kind of martial arts training in the past. That's intimately familiar with what's going on. It's just the extra frosting on the cake. I mean, we're sitting here talking about this, and I'm thinking about, a lot of things that I've written over the years. And aside from, doing this series, which was laden with fight scenes from issue to issue to issue, because that was basically the nature of the character.
Yeah.
Eventually getting hired to do the Green Hornet, which, years later, which was a dream come true for me because of that inspiration of Bruce Lee and getting to create what, the character that we created in the series was his half sister, Mishi Kato, who became our Kato in the series that we did for Now Comics. But getting her to move in that same, idea, that same flow, that same poetry. And it was a heck of a lot more dramatic in having a woman do it. Mm-hmm. Because obviously she was slighter, she was smaller, right? Mm-hmm. And a whole different body type. And knock on wood, Jeff Butler, the artist on the Green Hornet, did a super job with it. And we used to talk a lot of times about it because Jeff was always super self-critical about the fight scenes because he never thought he had that Gil Kane, Steve Ditko flow in his pages. But the truth of the matter was he was smart enough again to pull back and show full body action sequences when she took on bad guys that were 2 or 3 times her size. And that's always a hoot. That's always entertaining to see that little, small female, who knows her stuff and kicks butt. All right. And that's wicked dramatic. So now here we come, my career is like now 45 years later, and I'm doing Gin and Tonic with Cesar Feliciano. And that's basically, here we go, back to martial arts with an actual Chinese protagonist who grew up learning Kung Fu and other martial arts. Mm-hmm. And here we go, like I said, if you're going to do a tight-up shot, then make it a payoff. And the first panel at the top of this page, and this is from issue number 1, is basically him connecting with his elbow into the guy's nose.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. And there's that same thing where you get that natural flow of how the action guides you down the page, essentially. Also, I love the grip on the knife and the sort of the rigid form you get there, because that's a very Chinese and also Filipino like knife fighting, very like important culturally over there, as well as the different like ways they handle grips and things like that.
Right. I mean, basically, when writing the script, I got online again and started looking at various martial arts weapons that I used and taught in various classes and sensitivities, because I didn't want to fall back on the traditional nunchuck that everybody's
Right.
seen. And when I saw these dual, short sabers things, short knives or whatever you want to call them, I thought it was perfect. And it gave the character another sense or dimension of his fighting skills and being able to balance these two things in both hands at the same time, using his entire body and his feet, all of the backflip in the middle of the page. So again, it's just anytime you do anything, do your homework. It's a mantra that I refrain all the time. Okay, make it real, do the research, and don't just haphazardly slap it together.
Yeah, and we mentioned this, and it's probably a little more apparent in terms of hand-to-hand combat and martial arts, the importance of understanding that there are different disciplines that do things differently. But that is the case all the way down from martial arts to swords and melee implements, even to gunfighting, which will be a topic for a different show. But there are different pistol grips, but if you write your character using cup and saucer, you're objectively wrong. But the way that even this character holds their knife is going to be different than the way that Invictus holds his Gladius in Soul Ascendant. And then also, after understand that the Gladius is more like a fighting knife for a Roman line troop than it would be a sword, even though it looks like to us like it would be the Roman sword. But for them, that was their close quarters melee, like infighting weapon. For them, that was spear fighting. Right. So for them, a Gladius was a knife, and they're going to use knife-like stances.
Yep. And keep in mind, when I was, working on this project with Cesar is a black belt in karate himself, and actually trained in Japan for several years. So, I mean, whatever script I ended up handing him needed to be authentic, or he'd have called me out on it.
Yeah. Also, understanding. You can also, even without panels or like words here, we can get understanding of a character's sensibilities. Like, are they, as a protagonist, are they someone who's, a bit of like a scrapper? Are they going to fight to win? Are they super honorable and they're fighting, out of some moral code here? Because if you're fighting to win, you're always going for the low blow. It's just you already understand the character versus film panel. Like, you can use action to explain the characteristics of your characters. It's like, this guy's fighting to win. He's fighting for his life. He's going to get the person out of the way.
Yep.
Say, stop giving away my battle tactics, Tim.
Yes.
Low blow is all I got.
Well, having two daughters of my own, I can remember when they were teenagers and starting to date and whatever. And one of the easiest things to show them was simply, guy ever gets fresh with you, sure, you can slap him in the face, but you really want to stop him from getting fresh, hit him in the family jewels and walk away.
Yeah.
Right? A proper armbar. That's always a good thing.
It's also one of those things like, you don't necessarily need to sell it a whole lot, but it's great when you do sell it. But recently, what happened at WrestleMania, the Lobo is something that's so like cross-culturally known that is used as a stopping point or a moment of breaking action or moving from one beat to the next. One of the biggest storylines of the past couple of years, Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns' manager betrays him by dropping down and hitting him with a low blow in the middle of their match when he looks like he's about to win. Yeah. And it's this classic storytelling beat of, momentum has changed, or momentum has moved in some direction, or now there's a clear point of impact that everyone understands someone's not feeling good at the moment.
I love that page.
Yeah.
Our hero's up in the trees, and they can't find him until, look out.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, Ron,
they shoot all over the place. He just ducks, and half of them are shooting each other.
Yeah.
And you have the silhouette panel in the middle of the right.
Right.
Yeah, Jose did a great job with this.
Yeah.
I think that fight scene starts like on page 3 or 4. And it was one of those things where, again, we're opening up this series. It's going to be 4 graphic novel length books. And I really wanted to launch it with a real fast action sequence and just, go for the whole Megillah. Just wow our readers to eventually, be saying, who the heck is this guy? What's this all about? And then, get into the story itself.
I mean, action sequences are when you work to understand your pacing and the different tropes that you hear in different writing circles. To start with a bang, my favorite, of course, being always explode the helicopter, and these different ways of how you can use action or visually intense scenes to control the pacing to add dynamicism to your story. I forgot who it was. It might have been John Scalzi. Was talking about no one wants to read saying like, stop writing your action sequence. No one wants to read it unless that's the point. And so the idea of, is your action the point of what's happening? Is it going to be driving the scene? And we have is the action the point because it's creating the speak of this character, it's building up this character as being someone who is physically capable, imposing, everything like that. Or is it a moment where you were expressing character development through action, like the John Wick series does, where all the fights are back to back?
Yep.
For sure. Or is it something like a lot of the midpoint of the Fast and Furious series or the Triple X movies, a lot like the mid-2000s action kind of popcorn movies where the action didn't seem to do anything. We're just going from gunfight to gunfight because the directors thought that having AK-47s on screen would make up for the fact that the characters can't act.
I guess, well, you're going to appreciate this story, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea, is the action, pertinent to the narrative? Does it belong there? Does it help propel the story? Those kind of things, all right?
Yeah.
And my wife, Valerie, I swear, has this radar about that, all right? Now, I mean, I'm an action junkie. I go to the movies, and I don't care if it's just mindless action, for 90 minutes. I'm going to sit there and cheer and whatever and look to see if there are new moves or whatever.
Yeah.
But Val, on the other hand, gets that whole story thing, all right?
Yeah.
To the point where if it's like the beats, here's the narrative, but hey, I'm going to give you an action sequence because that's what you came to see, okay? But it has absolutely no value to the story, all right? I'm going to turn around and look, and Valerie's napping.
Mm-hmm.
Every time a useless action sequence comes on the screen, she's napping.
Yeah.
When it's over and then the story narrative picks up in the plot, she's awake and watching it. But the frivolous, useless action sequences put her to sleep immediately.
Yeah. I mean, that's like I mentioned before on previous shows that I'm a fan of hyperviolence, right? I like when an action sequence or like a movie or whatever comic shows me like the guy like the gunshot through the head blowing out the chunk of skull, right? And actually getting like the gory detail of it. But there's like the point where like that is just like it's just icing, right? There's no actual like flavor to it. There's no like substance to it. It's just something that's there. Whereas when someone actually treats that like the cake, like in Tokyo Ghost is a great comic where the action itself is part of the statement of the book itself, or things like Vandroid, where it's also like a commentary on gratuitous action and all this other stuff, where you can see the message or part of the plot that's driven by this moment of hyperviolence or by this moment of action. And of course, all art is subjective. Everyone there's someone that likes everything. So, if you like mindless action and that's your thing, absolutely go for it. There's a lot of great movies out there that'll do it for you.
Yeah, that will satisfy that to the max. Totally.
Yeah, but it's that moment of like if you're trying to like be conscious about how you can level up your writing your own action, because even an action junkie is going to get really more into it when the action is on almost deepened it away because the action itself isn't just two guys shooting at each other, but we actually get this moment of exploration of either the characters, the scene, or of the actual like combat style that's being expressed in that story.
Oh, I mean, totally. I mean, you can have any kind of a story where you start building your narrative and have the action be that teaching tool about who these characters are. Ultimately, I mean, we go back, we've talked about Westerns and revenge, that once you've established the characters in certain action sequences throughout the early part of the story, then you heighten your reader's interest. I mean, twofold.
Yeah.
Because suddenly it's not, just a mindless thing. If you have a convincing and really good villain who's maybe the equal to, your hero, then that whole narrative drive, story, action, by the time you get to the final climax, which is coming, it's going to be your hero against the chief bad guy. All right, man, that action sequence, I mean, its impact and sense of completion is going to be 4 times what the other early action sequences are all about.
Yeah. Kind of that point, like as it gets like really described in comics, one of my favorite examples, of course, I'm going back to Marvel, but 2 characters that commonly known for fighting hand to hand and get paired up frequently enough, Spider-Man and Moon Knight. As Moon Knight's gotten darker as a character, you'll have moments where how they handle a team up fight will be used to express the difference between the characters. Spider-Man is going to web up someone and leave them hanging, or he's going to knock someone out and move on. Whereas Moon Knight is going to use like the moon boomerangs, knock someone to the ground, and then pull out the nightsticks and close the distance.
Yep.
And so, using even just 2 different combat disciplines can do a lot to demonstrate the breadth of characters or the differences between them. Okay. Well, we kind of talked at length, so David, you really chime in a whole lot earlier either, but as an illustrator, as a colorist, when you're working on a fight sequence, what are going to be some of your considerations for how the direction comes from the writer to how you want to express it on the page? Kind of start with David, I guess, but are you just kind of doing a straight carry on of the panel or palette you've had in previous panels, or are you going to, besides just silhouette panels, or thinking a little bit more about how you can use color to drive some of those climactic moments or sequences?
Well, generally, unless I see something that stands out as something different. So, for example, if they go through and put a lot of heavy line weight and stuff like that to change a different mood on an actual panel, then I would tend to mostly stick with the panels, the colorings that we've done. But what I try to do when I do the action sequences is I usually try to color hold the speed lines and things like that. I also tend to push lighter areas on to show the direction that's going. So if you have a swoosh that goes this way, you may have an arc. So what I want to do is I want to, maybe I'll put lighter, more white on one direction so that it helps emphasize the direction that you're going. So if you're going forward, I'm going to go far out. If you're going forward, then up here is going to be a lot brighter, whiter, and that. Then down here, your starting point to show that there's a concentration as you're going up in that direction. So I will try and push things that way. I will do that sometimes in the color holds, just to try and just add a little bit of emphasis on that. Now, if there's any kind of direction that says, we want to go through and, tone out the background, and we want to, kind of make everything almost fade into black, and then really have this person, kind of think of your traditional anime where the person goes ding, and all of a sudden here's your your big power coming on, and you want to go through and really push colors and stuff like that. But unless that type of thing looks like it's pretty evident or called out, then I will stick more towards that and kind of emphasize things like the movements. Sometimes you may possibly blur some of the speed lines or something like that. I try not to overdo that because I've seen a lot of people go through and really blur everything out, and then it becomes very hard to I've seen where unless you have enough area around it to make it a real clean blur effect, it looks like somebody just went on the line art and drew a circle and then just hit a blur filter and all that. And that to me is not something that I don't like to do that, because it just doesn't go through and make it clear.
Oh, Jose, you're muted.
Yeah, Jose is muted.
So question to Dave and Jose. Just out of curiosity, what do you think of like sound effects in a fight? Like, bang, pow, this, the star thing or whatever, boom, boom,
I
boom.
want all the sound effects.
The Batman, da da da, bang, pow, boom.
Yep. I love the classic like Batman '66 sound effects and action. I mean, you have like some whatever hero or whatever just smacking the crap out of the Hulk. I want to see that big kaboom like up here when when you're just blowing Hulk into space.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of it depends on the book that you're in. I mean, if you're really trying to stay towards that that classic Batman, Adam West type Batman, then you're really going to go and overemphasize that with the bands and and stuff like that. Some other books, you may not want that. But again, like kind of like Jose was saying, that whole smashing the Hulk smashing or being smashed, that is where you would go in and color wise and play with real big blocks of color, sensationalism to make those things stand out even more. So
I can remember again writing some early scripts where I was so concerned with the script, with telling the story, that I wasn't putting in any kind of sound effects at all in my scripts until I had like one or two artists come back to me and say, well, you're going to put any sound effects in this fight? All right, I mean, it's like not a silent film. I mean, basically give us some again, zap, powing, whatever. And that's a challenge in and of itself sometimes, because it can be really comical. A lot of times I'm really okay with the artist doing that. If the artist feels that, hey, this is going to enhance the panel, the page, or whatever, then I say go for it. Use it.
Well, remember, there's also different ways. You can go through and you can put the BAM, the throop, or whatever. But then on the flip side, an artist, without putting the words on, can put in other degrees of things. Things like, when you have this hard hit, you have glasses or things spinning,
Right.
or the classic thing where the super strong guy goes through and punches the other super strong guy, and you just see across the water, and the rooster tail coming up. So there's the word functionality of it, but then there's also, depending on the style of the artist, there's also other elements that they can bring to also
Yep.
do it. And kind of the thing that initially started me thinking about that is, if you go back to movies and you go back to Jurassic Park, and you knew the T-Rex was coming because you started seeing the vibrations in the water and all this stuff. So depending on what you feel in the book is, you can use words, you can use other images and things like that to convey and emphasize those actions and those fight scenes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
Jose's face is like, huh.
I mean,
You're very.
I mean,
do you think, unlike talking head scenes, is there a limit to panels for an action scene, for a fight scene?
say that one more time.
Unlike a talking head scene, a fight scene, all right? Two characters duking it out. You think there should be a limit to panels?
I don't think so. There was, what is it? Was it Hawkeye comic where they showed Hawkeye fighting through like the different like layers of the building and whatnot? I think that was what 9, 12 panels, but like it flowed very quickly that there wasn't a lot of dialogue in it, right? But there was some very quick movements so that it showed that they were making short work of like the little lackeys as they were running through. Um, I mean, like I said before, I know a person who I think it was 16 page panels, 20 panels on a page, and all it was the guy going up the flight of stairs and then coming back to go to the bathroom and then finishing the rest of the trip up the stairs. All for the big payoff when you flip the next page is a big splash page of him coming out of the roof entrance onto the roof. You know what I mean? But that was just like a lot of buildup. But like in regards to fight scenes, I think that maybe I think there should be a concern like if you do just a splash page is a splash page, but like I think fight scenes warrant more panels. But it also depends on your pacing. Like if you're trying to slow that, the eye down, then yeah, more panels, more, more actions, more blocks, more, more attacks. But if you want to speed it through, I guess it depends on how fast you want to run through that page. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Do you use models at all? Like drawing models?
I do, not physically, but I have an app on my iPad that
like
is a
these.
model I can physically I can like, digitally move them around, and then I can even spin them in the camera and then spin the lighting however I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Are you talking about Poser? Or
Talking
some
about
app
what?
like? I'm talking about Poser or an app similar to Poser?
Oh no, I don't even know what that is. No, it's
Huh.
I don't remember what it's called, but yeah, Pete told me about it actually.
Okay.
But it's
I guess
really
also-
good for like just if I want to rough something out. You know what I mean? Like okay, this is the angle I want. This is the angle. Like then I'll start putting pencil to paper and whatnot. But it helps.
Yeah, Poser is an application that does that. It does figures and does lighting and stuff like that. So you can really, it's a
that's
3D
awesome.
3D program.
I've actually never heard of that.
So it kind of to expand on what Jose was talking about and Ron's question is, I think that limits. It's a judgment call because if you look at the Dragon Ball Z manga, I mean how those fight scenes go on forever, and it works. But then, if you turn around and you say, well, if the artist's goal is to just do splash page after splash page after splash page, then that's not going to work either.
Right.
So it is a mixture of the build up, the small panels with the spectacular panels, and it's that comic magic, kind of like the movie magic of getting the right balance to tell the story and not overextending it and not underextending it. So.
I think also because going back to Jose's examples there, especially that Mac Perfection Hawkeye sequence, I think also will rely on the style of panels that your creative team uses. Because if you're just using the traditional letterbox or standalone panels, realistically, there's only so much real estate on a page you can get through. But if you're doing something weird with it, like that book where there wasn't really panels on that page, but there was room dividers that acted like panels. And we saw this kind of blow up also in Marvel, in the 2000s, the idea of having most panels now being inlays of each other. So, Magneto throws a punch at someone and it lands in the next panel where it connects to their face. And I guess that's then, if for the artists in the room, when you're looking at setting up these combat sequences, are you looking at how the panels can be played with creatively, or how you can kind of make them part of the visual experience as well?
I will say that I am a huge fan of the classic paneling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
5, 6, 7 panels, different shapes or whatever. Most of them rectangular in nature. If I'm breaking away from that and throwing trapezoidal panels or something, you know what I mean, in there, then it just doesn't sit visually. It just doesn't sit well with me, and maybe that's just because I am an older comic collector. I like my classic comics as opposed to more modern stuff. So I just have grown up with that being the flow, that being the way you tell a story, paneling wise. The idea of, like I said, the Hawkeye sequence of them busting through walls and going through the rooms where the panels and whatnot. That was actually mind blowing for me. It still fit within the paradigm of rectangles in my mind, but but then it broke it.
Sure.
And I was, what am I looking at right now?
I think that there's some, I like the panels, the setup, but I also like, and again, this is a TV reference more than a comic reference, but if you think of the original Daredevil season 1 that was on Netflix, and you think of the hallway fight scene.
Yes.
Oh wow, yeah.
That to me was great. That was great layout. You're basically looking about mostly the same hallway, the same view. I mean, they do cut into a room and come back, but they return back in.
Right.
But there's a lot of good elements where you have set up you've established a set, a set room and a set layout, and how you can go back in and out and really play with that is really good. And Jose was saying, when you get a lot of the traditional ones, there's a lot of things that you can do to come back and forth and support that. But I have also seen a lot of panels that worked where you may have a big splash, and then you have inserted panels, not necessarily grid like, but it's one here, and overall maybe the shape is the shape of a C, or it kind of follows your normal view from the right, come down to the left and phase this way, where they're not exactly square, but they're well placed in there to keep the action flowing. So the main thing is to keep the action flowing properly. So
I think was it Dial H for Hero did the whole dial on a page, or a double, I think it was a double page spread where they did the dial, the telephone rotary dial, and each little thing was a panel. I feel that I've seen that in that comic, which I thought was really cool too.
Yeah. Like I
There's
said,
nothing that I would do.
sure. I said, like, I love anytime that artists get weird or experimental or like kind of loose and sketchy with their stuff. Ashley Wood, his work on IDW's Metal Gear Solid series, and the fact that like it was mostly just the panels mostly existed as different shades of backdrop, and then all the action was characters coming out onto other panels or moving around without them. So it's very anti Jose style, but also like you said earlier, it's all subjective. It's your own style, so there's no
Right.
if you're right.
Right.
Neither way is right or wrong. It's just whatever works best for you. But that was one of the things where you have a lot of CQB, like military style hand-to-hand combat as like taught in the Green Beret Field Manual, where they're using SOCOMs or USPs and like throwing up blocks while like going in different firing positions while knife fighting at the same time. But it's all moving between different panels. It's one person that's throwing a punch that connects to the person who's in a different panel, but the like arm is stretching over a mid panel. And you get this 3-panel layout of 3 different distinct scenes, but it's one action sequence that's happening in there. And I don't know, it makes it feel crunchy. That's what I always think. Like, I want to feel the crunch of the blow landing and someone catching it on the guard. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm thinking is also like you may have a double page spread and you have the fight progressing. Like maybe it starts in the top right corner and this person picks up and throws the person into the bottom left corner. Yeah. Well, now the fight transitions to the bottom corner, and maybe they throw them back on the other side. There's a lot of stuff there, and when I visually kind of weird that's going to my mind is a lot of the brutality of if you think of some of the early Mike Zack Punisher fights, there's some beautiful stuff that can be done with that while maintaining basically your stage is your background of
right,
and then where they are in the separate areas. So there's some really cool stuff that can be done. So
yeah, well, I feel like as comic creators, a common refrain that we can all go back to is, "It's strange what's going on in my head right now." And this has been That's Our Show on Tuesday. We'll be back next week with a topic I've yet to put in the calendar, and I need to do that soon. But make sure to check out Wednesday Whammies over Sunday for topics they have also not put in the calendar.
I do want to say a couple things real quick.
Yeah.
First off, congratulations, Jose, for finishing a great campaign.
Yeah.
You worked really hard on that.
Oh.
And it paid off very well.
They're 161% funded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Second thing is I just got a care package today.
Oh.
Nice.
So I haven't even opened the outer thing here, but here we go. Wolf Hunters.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You got this cover.
Oh yeah, you got all the different covers.
This cover, and of course the shiny cover.
Yes.
I like that one.
Yeah.
So
they're great covers, but that's probably my favorite one out of the 3. Not just because it's the chrome or the foil one, but like even the regular cover of that is a really good cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very good.
It's awesome. So congratulations on that one, Tim.
Thank you.
And I'm stoked to receive it today. So a lot of the backers are probably going to be getting it with sometime this week if they haven't gotten it already. So awesome. That's all. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it. We'll be back next week. So until that time,
make mine
Silverline.
Silverline.
Hi, I'm Greg Horn. Make mine Silverline.